Hello, good evening. When a 40-minute trailer of it was posted on YouTube in June, it was barely noticed. Tonight, much of the Muslim world is in turmoil over an American film they believe denigrates Islam and Muhammad. After the killing of the US ambassador in Syria, today hundreds of protesters stormed the American embassy compound in the Yemeni capital. In Cairo, heavy clashes with police. In Bangladesh, 1,000 demonstrators gathered to burn the American flag. If the Arab Spring once looked like offering the chance for a new kind of relationship between the Middle East and the West, the events of the past week have underscored the complex reality of what it's actually brought. Here's Tim Hewell.
Is this the thanks they get? The US consulate in Benghazi wrecked a year after America and other Western nations did so much to help free Libya from dictatorship. The ambassador, such an enthusiast for Arab democracy, and 3 other diplomats murdered. Today, the wave of anti-Americanism rolled on through the region. In Yemen, protesters tried to storm the US embassy. In Iraq, they burned the Stars and Stripes, chanting no to America, no to Israel. Meanwhile, in Egypt, police fired tear gas at demonstrators on a 3rd day of unrest, apparently sparked by an obscure amateur American film said to insult Islam. Democracy in North Africa, supported by the West, gives space to radical anti-Western groups that would once have been suppressed by the ubiquitous security forces. Soon after last year's uprising in Libya, Newsnight visited the newly liberated eastern town of Derna, famous or notorious for sending an unusually high number of young jihadis to fight the Americans in Iraq. Intelligence sources believe some such former jihadis returned to the anti-American fight in their own country last year, joining the revolutionary militias and keeping their weapons even after Gaddafi was overthrown. This reformed Libyan jihadi, once intimate with the al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, says he knows that groups influenced by al-Qaeda were behind the attack on the US consulate.
Al-Qaeda plan, which is influencing them, I can say, I'm comfortable to say, it's first-hand information. It's directly, I obtained this information from Zawahiri himself. They believe Libya strategically can't be a hub of a jihadi struggle or a jihadi conflict, but it should be used or utilized as a backyard or strategic or logistic space for a bigger jihadi Islamic battle, which is either Egypt or Algeria or maybe both of them.
America can't reverse the Arab Spring, but the question now for Washington is how to respond to the dangers it throws up. Should it continue, as President Obama has, to be wary of intervention? Should it avoid appearing to tread too heavily in the region for fear of exacerbating further resentment? Or has it become, as many Republicans feel, too indecisive and apologetic? America, they feel, needs to make clearer what it stands for.
What the United States needs to do is take the kind of leadership that will organize the international community to address these crises, and it doesn't appear that that's happening in the way that is productive and gets the results that we want, which are basically not to have to enter at the military level. I think it leads to others filling the kind of power vacuum, and often those that come to fill the power vacuum are radical Islamists.
But while America still has widespread support in Libya, shown by today's pro-Western demonstration in Benghazi, some think it should help the Libyan government track down the ambassador's killers, not try to launch its own strike against the terrorists.
If America now involved again, based on this old strategy on tactics, that means all the work has done by President Obama administration, it will just like disappear and go as just like a waste of time and assets as well. Because I believe America, to a certain extent, successfully, managed to pull itself out of what's so-called war against terror, which is very important for the future of the relations between the United States of America and the Arab world.
It's a balancing act not just for America, but also for new Arab leaders like Egypt's Islamist President Morsi in Europe this week to seek Western financial help for his country.
We will never accept, we cannot agree. We stand against anybody who harbors these false slogans or cause this hatred amongst the people or insensitivities. We cannot accept that there is such enmity or aggression against embassies, consulate, or against people, or the killing of anybody, no matter how.
But this evening, clashes resumed in Cairo, despite an attempt by Google to calm the anger by blocking Egyptian access to the controversial film. Tomorrow, plans for an even larger demonstration will further test the increasingly ambiguous relations between America and the new Arab democracies.
Tim Huell reporting now. Well, let's discuss this with the former British ambassador to the United Nations, Sir Jeremy Greenstock, who's here in the studio. And from Washington, the former US Deputy Secretary of Defence, Paul Wolfowitz. Thank you both very much indeed for joining me. And to you, Jeremy Greenstock, first of all, are you surprised by how much this has spread? Do you think the film itself had anything to do with it, or is that symbolic of something else?
No, the film is definitely the immediate proximate cause. But there are people on a spring out there waiting to show their anger or to express their resentment at any insult they see coming their way. And remember that the most significant feature of the whole Arab Spring, country by country, it's the same everywhere, and it goes beyond the Arab world, is that the voice of the people is now a more powerful political phenomenon. And there are different parts of the voice of the people, but they can express themselves now. And the security forces aren't able to deal with all the emanations of that.
Paul Wolfowitz, says if you think it's spontaneous, and one paper here in the UK is suggesting this was the result actually of a serious security breach, that the whole thing was planned, and that secure documents have now gone missing from the embassy in Libya. Do you know anything about that? Would that surprise you?
Look, I think there's a lot that we still don't know about who organized these demonstrations, how they happened. They're probably different in each place, but certainly what took place in Benghazi was not a spontaneous outburst of popular anger. It was a nighttime attack with mortars and heavy machine guns by probably a rather small armed group. And I think, yes, there are issues between the United States and the Arab world, and we shouldn't expect them to be resolved anytime soon. This is a huge upheaval, but what we're seeing, I think, as much as anything, is a fight within the Arab world. And in July, the Libyans had a remarkably peaceful election in which the Muslim Brotherhood came in a distant second, and these extremists barely showed. The Libyan people really voted for a very religiously conservative but moderate approach to politics, but the people with the guns have a different view of things, and this was done with guns.
Sure, but nonetheless, it was your ambassador that was targeted or killed. It's the US embassies in other cities that have been targeted. This is about making the US the external enemy once again, isn't it?
Well, it's also about terrorizing people, about saying that if you stand up for reasonable positions, you can be killed, and I think it's very important to stand up to this kind of terror. At least in the case of Libya, we really are talking about armed extremists. Unfortunately, as much as Libya owes its freedom to the United States and your country and France and others who came to their assistance, the people who did the arming and training of the Libyan militias were very heavily dominated by extremists, and I think we're seeing one of the results of that.
It's very interesting, that line about owing your freedom. I mean, that the sort of the Caliban line comes into mind. You know, you taught me language, and my profit is I can curse you with it, paraphrase. A lot of people will be looking at what happened in the Arab Spring and saying, this is what you get?
I think when a space opens up with a new political arrangement, things can get worse before they get better. You can't look for a steady graph of improvement. It's going to be a very jagged curve.
You could say things have got worse in the sense that this wouldn't have happened under a Gaddafi. This wouldn't have happened under a dictatorship.
Yes, but this is a horrid period, and a horrid incident against American diplomats and citizens. But it's not going to be the only thing that counts on the score of whether this was worthwhile or not. It's going to be a long process. It's going to be a generational process, and some bad things are going to happen.
And when Paul,
you know, the American embassy was attacked under Gaddafi, just to be clear, except we knew who was behind it. It was very clear then. What we reasonably know now, and it's just very important to say this is not a popular move by the Libyan people. The Libyan people are, for the most part, I believe, we haven't taken opinion polls, shocked and disgusted by what was done to somebody who was deeply committed to the future of their country, and they know it. And now the question is, can that sentiment be mobilized to an effective reaction against these extremists? And to talk about some obscure film is a distraction in that case.
What would you make of Mitt Romney's words today when he says American leadership is still sorely needed, that American leadership is made necessary by this? Do you agree with that, or is it time to take a back seat?
I think the back seat is part of what got us into this situation in Libya, where the people with the guns are not in any way connected to the United States. I think we would have been in a much better, stronger position if the Libyan militias had been armed and trained by the United States and its NATO allies. But look, I think the fundamental strategic point here is you have 1.5 billion people in the Muslim world. I would bet at the high end of it, most 10%, maybe 20%, it all share these views. But the other 80% are in danger of being terrorized into silence or some kind of complicity. And I think it depends on how you define leadership, but I think those people hope for the United States to be there to help them, and not just the United States, but Europe as well.
What do you make of this idea they should have been armed?
What, the diplomats should have been armed?
No, so when he was talking about part of that uprising of the intervention.
Yes, I mean, the fact that arms are awash amongst the people is extremely serious and makes it that much more difficult to defend yourselves. You need, against this potential disaster, a day you can't predict, you need very large security forces around an embassy there. This idea of leadership, that you can go in and change the character of what's happening in the Arab Spring, is misplaced in my view. It's the people who are speaking, and it's going to go wrong in certain aspects, but we can't intervene from outside. It's not a test of the leadership of outside people.
Last word to you, Paul Spitz.
I'm sorry, the people weren't speaking in Benghazi. It was a handful of armed extremists. We were told if we arm the Libyan opposition, then the country will be awash in weapons, so we didn't arm them. Well, it's awash in weapons, but they're weapons over in the hands of people that are not particularly friendly to us and are not friendly to the majority of the Libyan people. And I think that point, look, maybe leadership is the wrong word, but very strong supportership.
All right.
The people in Libya who are embattled now need our help.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.